Hello and welcome to our webinar today on cyber incident response, a tabletop exercise. During this exercise, we're going to be covering two different cyber incident response scenarios. So we're going to cover a phishing example and we're going to cover a ransomware example. We're going to go through each of the scenarios and we're going to talk about the types of activities that an organization may take when dealing with a cybersecurity incident of one of these two scenarios. So hopefully everybody gets something out of this. If you do have any questions, please put them into chat and we'll make a start now. So just a reminder to everybody, you will all be muted as you heard on the announcement just a second ago. If you do have any questions, please put them into the questions box on the panel and we'll hopefully have time to pick up some at the end of the session. And an email, you will receive an email of a copy of the presentation slides and the recording later on. It will also be posted to YouTube as well. So about IT governance and GRCI Law. So we are part of a wider group. So it's the GRCI International Group, PLC, which make up a number of organizations which help individuals and organizations to better their cybersecurity. We take a defense in depth approach to cybersecurity, and we have a range of services which will help you to better your environment. As it says there, so there's 20 years worth of experience, or plus, over 20 years now. We have over 200 employees. We are mainly an IT governance, risk and compliance solutions organization, but we do have specialist areas across the group. We have more than 12,000 clients across 5 continents. So we are a global company. We do provide services across the world, different relating to cybersecurity. Sorry, I get the words out. And we have a comprehensive ISO 27001 product and service offering. That's the bread and butter. But we do, like I said, we do provide other services as well, which may help your organization. So just some statistics for yourselves. So we've successfully carried out more than 1,500 penetration testing projects. So this is quite a big area of the business. We have more than 1,600 cybersecurity projects delivered to date. Successfully certified more than 5,500 organizations to Cyber Essentials, and then more than 1,100 organizations use our governance, risk and compliance software, which is our cyber comply modular package that an organization can use to manage their cybersecurity. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end as well. So moving on. First, we'll talk about the team. So myself, my name is Cliff Martin. I'm the head of cyber incident response at GRCI Law. I lead the cyber incident response capability within the organization. We provide both proactive and reactive cyber incident response capability to client organizations. I joined the company in April 2021, but prior to that, I worked in the defense and the education sectors. I have experience with both IT and OT environments as well, so I got an idea of the complexities within both environments. What I'll do now is I'll pass you over to my colleague, Vanessa, just to give her an introduction.
Hello everyone, I hope you're having a lovely day so far. As Cliff said, I am Vanessa. I joined the organisation in July 2022. Before that, I have 9 years plus experience in the digital forensic industry. And during that time, I received a number of awards, as you can see. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. So to get started, like I said, we're going to cover a couple of scenarios. We're going to cover a phishing and a ransomware scenario, and we're going to come at this from an incident response perspective. But first, we want to just lay a bit of the groundwork. So we want to talk about what's the process we're going to follow. So in just a sec, Vanessa will go through the incident response process. We are tailoring our approach to NIST's approach, which is NIST Special Publication 800-61, revision 2. So Vanessa is going to talk through each of the phases, and then we'll cover each of the scenarios just after that as well. So over to you, Vanessa.
Okay, so the NIST Incident Response Framework is a set of guidelines for organisations to follow when responding to a cybersecurity incident. It is a voluntary framework that can be used by organisations of all sizes in all different sectors. The framework, as you can see by the image, is structured into 4 phases. You've got the preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, and lastly, the post-incident activity. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail. The first phase is preparation, and this phase involves planning and preparing for a cybersecurity incident. This includes identifying assets, threats and vulnerabilities, developing incident response procedures and training staff on how to respond to incidents. The next is analyze. This phase involves detecting and analysing a cybersecurity incident. This includes monitoring systems for suspicious activities, investigating incidents and determining the extent of the damage. The next one is containment, eradication and recovery. This phase involves containing the incident, eradicating the threat and recovering from the incident itself. This may involve isolating affected systems, removing malware and restoring data. And the final stage, which is the post-incident activity, this phase involves learning from the incident and improving the organisation incident response capabilities. This includes conducting a post-incident review, implementing corrective actions and communicating with stakeholders. And as Cliff said, this is what we'll be focusing the tabletop around today.
Yeah. So for each of our scenarios, we're gonna be focusing on the detection analysis, the containment, eradication, and recovery. We'll cover post-incident activity at the end, but we're not going to focus on each scenario. We'll talk about what does that include? Why should we do a post-incident activity at the end, which then feeds back into our preparation. So ensuring that the organisation is ready to protect against, detect, and then respond to a cybersecurity incident. So just moving on, like I said, we're going to cover 2 tabletop exercises. We're going to do the phishing and we're going to do ransomware, but we're going to try and make this as interactive as possible. Now, this is something that we don't normally do. We're trying not to do a death by PowerPoint. We're going to try and get you guys engaged. So as we go through each of the scenarios, we've got a number of questions that we're going to throw to you, and we're going to see what people's responses are to you, are in response to this. Some of them will have correct answers, which we'll go through, and some of them are just to see how you would respond and see what people's thoughts are on what is happening, what is the response. So we're going to start with the phishing scenario. So I'm going to hand it back over to Vanessa, who's going to talk about the scenario itself and then the response activities.
So the first scenario is all about phishing, and this is the start of our scenario. So members of the HR team have reported issues to the IT service desk regarding an email requesting a password change for their Microsoft Office 365 accounts. They've encountered a problem with the URL link not functioning after entering their credentials and clicking the submit button. The email appears to have come from a trusted source, Bob Smith, who's a HR manager. He is currently on annual leave, and that's why they're prompting them to contact the IT department. IT team responsible for authorising password change emails is understandably suspicious of this situation. Consequently, they have initiated the process by raising an initial ticket. So to progress this scenario, the first stage, according to NIST, is the detection and analysis stage. So detection analysis in NIST is the process of identifying and understanding cybersecurity events in a timely manner. In this scenario, it is IT who have detected a potential incident, as they are suspicious because they are the only ones who can send out a password reset email. As a result of this, the current known associated devices are isolated to prevent the spread of the potential incident. The next step is to verify that the cyber incident has occurred and to find out more information. This is done by conducting the initial triage of the event, i.e. analysis, which leads us to our first question, or our first poll, I should say. With regards to this scenario, how would you verify that a cybersecurity incident has occurred? please select all that apply. You could ask a senior manager to contact Bob to establish more information about details around sending the email to his team. The IT service desk to speak to HR to discover more details regarding the email received. C, contact senior team as this is not currently an ICT's responsibility. Or D, review the emails itself. So I'm going to put the poll up now. I think we're going to give you about 30 seconds. Remember, you can all select more than one. Okay, well, the majority, as you can see, have reviewed the email itself. You've got followed by get IT to speak to HR or ask the senior manager to contact Bob. Well, in this instance, the preferred method of verification would be A, B, and D. A and B, due to the nature of the incident, it's a good idea to gather information directly from the source itself and to get their side of the story, such as, why did you trust it? For example, why was he working out of hours? Because you work 9 to 5, so why did you send that email so late at night? Simple things like that you can find out. D, which is review the email itself. Yes, there are very quick verifications that you can do at this stage to establish if it actually is a phishing email. For example, hovering over the URL to see the link, the grammar errors, spelling, and does it have a sense of urgency in its language. C, the reason at this stage, it is more than likely is IT's responsibility to initially gather the facts to be able to escalate it appropriately. Okay, so from conducting this initial investigation, the following facts are gathered. During the analysis of the email, it was found that the threat actor had utilised language that made the email appear to be urgent, which is a form of social engineering. After speaking with Bob, it is discovered that he had a similar email, which he thought nothing of at the time, as the URL didn't work for him either. This was not reported because nothing appeared to happen once he clicked the submit button. The users believed that this was from a trusted source. They also clicked the link. So as a result of the initial triage, it is determined that this is a cyber incident, which requires the incident response team to be mobilised. So now this is the time to get the senior members together to establish a plan of action. The incident response team are formed via WhatsApp, as there is potential risk with Teams and emails being compromised due to this being linked to the Office 365 accounts. Based on the facts gathered so far, the incident will be rated at a low P3 because it appears that it's only isolated to one department and the rest of the organisation can continue to function. The incident response agree that not all of their questions have been answered in the initial triage conducted by IT, and more information is required to understand the impact and the risk to the organisation. Example questions can be like how many people within the organisation received this suspicious email, go into a more depth investigation into the email itself to confirm what actually happened once you click the link and what happened to the credentials that are entered. So IT now need to conduct a more depth digital investigation, which will lead me to our next poll. Right, during this digital investigation, what would you actually consider doing? And again, please select all that apply. So the options are A, working on the original device, chain of custody, setting and following the objectives of the investigation, and keeping notes. Thank you all for your votes again. Oh, we've got there's a mixed poll there. Well, from my personal experience, well, it will be chain of custody, setting and following the objectives of the investigation, and keeping notes should be considered. The reason why working on the original device during an investigation is not recommended is because it can potentially alter or destroy the evidence. To avoid this risk, it is better to create a forensic image of the device. A forensic image is an exact copy of the device hard drive or other storage media. The forensic image can be analysed on a separate computer without any risk of compromising the original evidence. And in this scenario, a copy of the emails or the logs can be used instead. Okay, so the chain of custody is important because it ensures that evidence is not tampered with or contaminated from the time it's collected to the time it is potentially presented in court. The chain of custody document should be signed and dated by each person who has access to the evidence. This ensures that everyone involved in handling the evidence is accountable for its integrity. The objectives of the investigation should be set at the beginning and should be followed throughout. This will help to ensure that the investigation is conducted in a consistent and orderly manner. It is also important to note that the objectives of the investigation may change as the investigation progresses. And finally, by keeping notes during a digital investigation, the investigator can help to ensure that the investigation is documented, that the findings are accurate, and the investigation is conducted in a professional and ethical manner. Notes should be detailed enough so a third party could recreate the investigation. So as a result of this investigation, we're still in the detection analysis stage, but as a result, we can confirm that the original email was sent to Bob's account and it dates back for 2 months. The email was sent from a Gmail account indicating the use of a public IP address. The email contained a fake link that led to a counterfeit Microsoft Office 365 login page. So this was an attempt to gain deeper access to the organisation by harvesting user account credentials. There was no payload downloaded when the link was clicked, and it was confirmed all members of HR received the fake email from Bob, and about half of them actually entered the login details. It is confirmed that it is isolated to HR and no other department received the email. So after assessing this, the incident response team are happy to continue to classify this as a P3 incident. Okay, so our next poll is, according to NIST, which obviously we spoke about earlier, what would be the next stage? Please can you select one? So you've got the choice between prepare, containment and eradication, post-incident recovery, and detection and analysis. Okay, so prepare would have been completed before the incident has occurred. We have already done the detection analysis stage. Post-incident is the last, and the recovery is just before post-incident. So this leaves us with containment and eradication. Containment refers to the actions taken to limit the impact of an attack and prevent it from spreading to other systems. And eradicate refers to the actions taken to remove the attack from the infected systems completely, which leads us on to our next poll, which I hope you'll listen to what contain and eradicate is, because out of the following, what would you do to contain and eradicate the incident? You've got reset all the passwords for the associated with the incident, implement a rule to restrict access to the malicious URL, refine email filtering rules to proactively block similar phishing attempts, and distribute a bulletin to all staff members about the email. And I should have said you can obviously click more than one on this. Ooh. It's got evenly spread across all. Well, from my experience, all the answers would contain and eradicate this incident. Resetting the passwords can help to migrate the risk of unauthorized access to the account. If the account has been compromised, resetting the password will force the attacker to start over. Implementing a rule to restrict access to malicious URL will prevent more people from entering their credentials. Refining the email filtering rules will minimise the risk of type of phishing emails coming through and preventing further incidents, and distributing a bulletin to all staff to raise awareness. They are the first line of defence. Making them aware will decrease the risk and preventing further clicks. Okay, so as I said, we're on the containment and eradication stage. The following containment and eradication actions will be taken by IT in this scenario. Reset all HR user passwords for their Office 365 accounts. Change proxy, DNS and firewall rules to restrict and block emails from Gmail accounts. Apply email filters to proactively block similar phishing email attempts containing similar URLs and keywords. Restricting access from known malicious IP addresses into Bob's Office 365 accounts, and they have communicated with all staff members to raise awareness about the phishing email, and again, as I said, to prevent further clicks and potential spread. So now that the incident has been contained and eradicated, the next step is to restore to its normal operations, which is the recovery stage. The primary goal of recovery is to bring the affected system, service and operation back to normal as quickly as possible. This minimises the disruption caused by the incident and allows the organisation to resume its essential functions. In terms of this incident, the following should be considered. During your recovery period, you should be proactively monitoring the IT environment to confirm that there is definitely no other suspicious or unusual activities as a result of the incident. Once the CR team have agreed that the investigation can be conducted resulted in no other suspicious activity, the HR devices that were isolated initially can be brought back onto the network. And then the next stage will be the post-incident review, but as we said, we will cover this later in the webinar. But for now, I'm going to hand you back over to Cliff, who will be talking about the next scenario, which is based on ransomware.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. Hopefully that was useful for everybody, talking about phishing. I know there's been a couple of comments being ongoing. One of the comments talked about this scenario happens on a daily basis. That is correct, but it is one of the most common ways that an attacker gets into an IT environment. So you need to have a plan in terms of how to respond to a phishing attack. So that's why we went through it. Another one, Ross, absolutely, you picked up on the question, what not to do during the containment and eradication. That was a typo. But yeah, you are absolutely right not to check any boxes on that final one. Apologies, thank you very much. So for our next scenario, we are going to talk about ransomware. So it's a bit more detailed, and rightly so. Phishing is one of those ways in which a threat actor may get into a target organization. So we're going to go through this next scenario then. So in a similar format to what Vanessa talked through, the scenario itself, so I'll just read this off. So a member of the HR team has recently contacted the IT service desk, reporting an issue with their files. Several key files used by the staff within the HR department have been discovered with a mysterious file extension, as there. This unauthorized modification has rendered these files inaccessible to the team. It's worth noting that these files are currently stored on premise. since the company has not yet transitioned the HR system into Azure cloud environment. Now, this is something that we come across quite regularly. It's just where the organization has not managed to transition the complete IT environment. So there'll be areas in which we need to respond and conduct our cyber incident response. So based on that scenario, we're going to jump into the first question for this one then. So based on the information provided in the scenario up to this point, how would you classify the severity of this incident? It's either high, so P1, a medium, P2, a low, P3, or do we still need more information before we can do anything? And it should be enabled now, so everybody can start voting. So just left it off 30 seconds. So it's a nice spread. I'll just share the answers so you can all see. So it's a nice spread. Obviously 46% said high, which yeah, I agree with. 18% said medium, 3% said low, and then 33% said need more information. Now, yeah, I agree. At this point, we don't have enough information. So for me, we need to undertake our initial triage. We need to understand: do we actually have an incident, or is it some form or some other issue which we're not aware of at the minute? So for me, the answer is we need more information at this point. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong with what you've said. I'm just saying we need to look at that. So back to the slides. So as we move on, so this issue has obviously been reported to IT. We first need to deploy somebody to verify that this is an actual incident that we need to do more about. So usually we'll deploy someone within our first response team who should be trained to isolate the compromised system. In this case, it's the HR server, and then perform that initial triage. So during this triage, we've discovered that the attackers, the threat actors, had left a ransomware note suggesting that they had exfiltrated sensitive data and encrypted vital files. So yeah, I think we're dealing with something here. The note indicates that the organization has fallen victim to Black Cat ransomware group. The file extension is associated with the group as well. So that further verifies that we are dealing with a ransomware attack here. The group is demanding a ransom of £50,000 to be paid in Bitcoin within the next 72 hours. Now, this is quite urgent. We need to react to this pretty quickly. So as you can imagine, having this time limit means that we need to do something. The encrypted and exfiltrated files consist of personal documents, including staff contracts, medical information, payroll information, and records of internal grievances. So quite sensitive when it comes to the organization, especially that this is a HR server. So there's other implications that we need to consider as we're doing this. So as you'd expect, this incident has to be escalated to the cyber incident response team and declared an incident. You know, the first responder needs to have that process in place that they can escalate this to the most appropriate person. So in this case, it's the Chief Information Security Officer who's responsible for managing and coordinating the incident, who's at a senior level and make key decisions, strategic decisions for the organization to ensure that we respond to this in an appropriate manner. So next question. So this is more just to understand from yourselves. So if you're in a similar situation, let's say you had a similar ransomware attack, have you assessed in your cyber incident response documentation whether your organization would consider paying a ransom in the event of a ransomware incident? So the answers are obviously yes, no, and just don't know. So I'll just launch that now. And I will share the answers so everyone can see. Yes, there's a nice spread there. Yes, yeah, we really do need to include it in the documentation as to what the organization's policy is on ransomware, and if you are going to pay a ransom if this is to occur. If you don't have it, it makes it quite difficult because you're making the decision on the spot, and a lot of emotion will be involved as well, which is something that you don't want. We do suggest you do document it. That being said, you need to make sure that this document is secure, because ransomware groups are becoming more, well, not becoming more smart, because they are really intelligent group of people. They will look for these documents, and then they might tailor that ransom payment to whatever you say the threshold is. So it's just one to be aware of when you're producing these documents. It's got to consider both sides. So we'll come back to the presentation again. So I'm going to quickly move on to another question. So who should be part of the incident response team during a ransomware incident? The IT department only, a cross-functional team, including legal, IT, HR, and senior management, which may also include external parties, external cybersecurity consultants exclusively, or only the individuals affected by the incident. So in other words, HR in this case. So sorry, I'll just start the poll again. There we go. Yeah. So everybody can see. So the majority answers, yes, absolutely. It has to be a cross-functional team. It has to include your legal, your IT, your HR. Incident response is not an IT issue. It's a business issue that needs to be considered at all levels of the organization. If you are hit with a ransomware attack, you need to consider the legal implications. So before I talked about the type of data that was exfiltrated, well, that could have other implications in terms of legal and regulatory. You just got to think of things like GDPR, for example, that you have a limit in terms of when you need to report. That might not necessarily be your IT team who makes that request, that report to the ICO in this case. So yeah, it's exactly what I expected to come back from the answers. Oh, sorry, clicked on too many buttons there. So moving on then. So we're going to continue with the detection analysis. So we've obviously got a problem here. We need to do something about it. As part of this, the organization's decided that they just do not want to pay the ransom. Their policy is not to pay the ransom, so they're very reliant on the capabilities of the team in order to respond to this. As part of that, a virtual war room is established to allow the CERT, the Cyber Incident Response Team, to discuss and share information. This is something that has to be set out that's out of band of the IT environment. Time and time again, we see reports that ransomware groups or just general threat actors like to stay abreast of any incident response activities because they like to remain undetected for as long as possible. So we would suggest you set up some sort of out of band communication platform like WhatsApp, as Vanessa mentioned earlier. We have seen a number of others, Signal, WhatsApp. People do use Teams if they're confident that the internal IT organization hasn't been compromised, but we do suggest having that out of band comms already set up and ready to go. Also, as part of this, an initial assessment has to be conducted to identify any possible risks or issues that may arise as part of your incident response. So, for example, if the organization did decide that they were going to pay the ransom, there is obviously a risk there that they made the payment to the ransomware group, and then for whatever reason, they didn't get the decryption key or the decryption key didn't work. That's obviously a significant risk, which puts the organization at a huge financial issue there that could affect their operational and reputational perspective. The next one there is, so we talked about the classification and severity of the incident earlier. Yes, this this is quite severe in terms of an organisation. This has to be classified as a P1 incident. It's given a priority that's sufficient for what the organisation is dealing with. So it means that they're going to prioritise their response in this instance. As I said, also the legal regulatory requirements. This is the point now you've confirmed that you've had an incident, you've detected that something has occurred. We need to make those reports. We need to inform the UK ICO or the NCSC or Action Fraud if it's appropriate. Remember, you've got that 72 hours when personal data has been compromised, and that includes from a ransomware attack as well. Remember, you've got to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, and if any of those are compromised from a personal perspective, you need to report that as a potential data, or as a data breach, not a potential data breach, because we've confirmed that already. Then a forensically sound image of the server, it needs to be acquired. We need to undertake a forensic assessment of this device because we need to understand the root cause. How did the attackers get into the environment? And that's been done by a third party because this organization doesn't have that capability, and that's okay. You can subcontract third parties. It's just a case of you need to be aware of the implications of doing so. So before that's done as well, the objectives need to be identified and agreed with the certs. So what are you looking for? What questions are you asking? Because going to a forensic organization and saying, do this thing for us and find everything, it's going to be very difficult. We want to pinpoint exactly what we're trying to answer as part of this incident response activity. So just moving on. So the digital forensics, it comes back, it confirms a lot of the information we thought we already knew or was confirmed as part of the triage. So on the HR server, the threat actors managed to exploit a known vulnerability. They managed to escalate their privileges and then take a copy of the usernames and passwords stored on the server. So meaning the attackers managed to get something into our environment. They managed to bring in their own software, like a tool called Mimikatz, if you're familiar with it, which allows you to pull username and passwords from the system. So obviously we need to consider that as part of our containment and eradication actions, which we'll talk about in just a sec. The threat actors also managed to create their own accounts for persistence, which is quite a common approach when it comes to ransomware, in terms of creating their own accounts and blending into the environment to make it more difficult for us to detect that something has occurred. It was also confirmed that data was exfiltrated to a known cloud storage platform. So there is a number of most common ones that are used. So Mega is one that's constantly coming back and forth in the news. The threat actors also managed to move laterally from a device used by another member of the HR department. So the attackers managed to get onto this device, then move laterally onto the HR server. So once they got into the environment, they had the ability to move laterally, which is not as easy to detect unless you have those permissions and capabilities in place already. So as a result of the forensics, that device was then subsequently isolated and reviewed as part of this activity. The threat actors managed to social engineer the member of staff using a phishing email. So like I said before, it's one of the most common ways of doing it. And as part of that, a list of indication compromise are identified. So basically, this is a way to identify other aspects of the attack so that you can look further afield within your environment. So things like file hashes, IP addresses, domains that are used that a malicious actor may come from, which then can be used as part of your containment and eradication actions following that. As part of this, it was confirmed that only 2 devices were compromised. Great. It makes it a lot easier. That's not always the case. So we've got a better understanding of what's gone on. We've done our analysis. We can now start to contain the incident to ensure that we can start to get back up and running as best we can. So as part of these containment actions when dealing with ransomware, all confirmed compromised credentials, including service accounts, have to be changed. It is common, like I said, that attackers will use accounts that are there to try and blend into the environment. We see this time and time again. We need to change those, any that are suspected or confirmed to be compromised. Any remote access connections from external sources or internal, I suppose, need to be reviewed. They need to be blocked if they're non-essential. it's really easy for me to stay here and say you should block every connection, but realistically that might not be a possibility depending on the type of incident you are dealing with in your organization. We also need to segment those critical systems from the compromised environment. We've said that it's only 2 devices here, but what if it was further? What if the attackers had only deployed the ransomware on those 2, but managed to compromise other devices, which wasn't as obvious as part of this? The request is made to the cloud provider to delete the organization data. So this is one that generally gets forgotten about. You should still make those requests to those third parties. So I said that the data was exfiltrated to a third-party cloud platform, like Mega, for example. You still need to make those requests to try and get that data removed, just so it's not in a number of places. Also, the integrity of recent backups have to be reviewed to ensure that the attackers haven't compromised that as well. Majority of the time, threat actors, I keep using threat actors, they get into an environment, months, weeks, days before actually deploying the ransomware in order to set up the environment. Think about it from your own IT environments. You need to ensure that you have the right permissions. You need to ensure that your system requirements are there when you're installing various software. That's the same for ransomware. They need to make sure that they have the right capabilities in order to undertake their objective, in this case, which is a ransomware. So if the threat actors have been in the environment for a month, for example, how many backups have been compromised in that time? We need to ensure that the integrity of those backups are okay and that the backdoors that were installed as part of that is not has not been compromised. And then the final one there, communication strategy has to be identified and agreed by the CERT. So how are you going to talk to your internal and external parties? You need to say something. How do you do that? Which brings us on to the next poll question. So if your organization was to face a similar incident, at what step should your organization communicate with its staff? Choose the most appropriate. So are we saying detection analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, post-incident? Apologies, the poll doesn't actually include every step. Just select all that's relevant or that you believe is relevant. And it should see it now. So just 30 seconds. I'll just share the results. So it's a nice spread. You would expect there to be some form of communication throughout the incident. The only thing you need to be aware of is you need to make sure that you're not compromising the integrity of the investigation. If you communicate too early that you're dealing with an incident, as I said, the threat actors might still be there on the network. They may be listening to your communications. They may be receiving similar emails or compromising the environment who's receiving those sort of emails. So you do need to consider it as part of your strategy in terms of how you are going to communicate. And that, like I said, that includes both internal and external parties as well. So I'll just hide that and bring us back to the presentation. So as we continue on with, as we move into eradication, the cyber incident response decided that the HR server will be rebuilt rather than replaced due to financial issues or whatever. But it's going to be using known good media and images. We don't want to restore the entire image from a backup because there may be issues in terms of integrity, but we want to be selective. So we want to use our gold disks, for example, to build those systems. And I know it's a hassle, but we'd rather ensure that our new server doesn't have the same backdoors as what was compromised previously. The HR staff member laptop is also provided with a known clean device, which then they can use based on the baseline configuration that the organization currently has. And I've put a note there as well. So if additional systems were compromised, we need to look at other artifacts that we need to consider as part of the eradication. Now, this includes things like PowerShell scripts, C2 communications, command and control communications, abnormal and malicious software applications, or applications that are running in memory. Now, because of this scenario, we said that everything's going to be rebuilt, so we don't necessarily have that issue, but if we were taking a different approach where we were saying we were just going to remove the malware and then hopefully everything gets back up and running, we need to make sure that the integrity of our IT environment is still okay. Right, this is the final question, I promise. So question 9. As we move into the recovery phase, what is the goal of the recovery phase in the incident response process following a ransomware attack? So the options are to bring the affected systems back online and restore normal operations, to determine the identity of the ransomware group, to negotiate a reduced ransomware payment with the attacker, or to assess the impact of the organization's reputation. And I'll just share that now. Yeah, just close that now. Thank you very much. Like I said, that's the last question. Thanks for everybody's interaction with these. So the final one, you should be able to see, the majority of people said to bring effective systems back online and restore normal operations. Absolutely. As I said before, the main objective of incident response is to get the organization back up and running into a state that they can conduct business as usual. So I'll just hide that one again. Right, the final stage. So we're talking about recovery. So all the HR server is then brought back up and running with the latest updates and security patches that are installed on the HR server, but it needs to be tested to ensure that the functionality is the same as what was expected. The new server is then scanned with an up-to-date anti-malware solution to make sure there isn't anything on there that we're not expecting. As I said, this should all be built with gold disks or systems that we ensure the integrity of that software. Testing should be carried out by IT and witnessed by the system owner. That's quite key. The people who own these systems have to sign them off to ensure that they're okay to return back to normal operations. It's really easy just to bring something back without properly testing it. It needs to have appropriate sign-off in order to do this. As well as doing that, we need to ensure that we're taking a baseline of both the operating system and the network configuration to ensure that we can detect the abnormal and the malicious behavior afterwards. And then once it's all signed off, data can then be restored from the latest backup or the latest known to be good backup in accordance with any backup and recovery procedures. And then the final one there, the IT environment, it has to be closely monitored by IT or a third party for some time to confirm that the threat actor is no longer present or have access or have the ability to come back into the environment. Ideally, this should continue, indefinitely, but that's not always the case. If you're using a third party, not time again, but we've had a couple of examples recently where we've had to help clients who have been attacked by similar ransomware groups weeks within sorting themselves out. And it's only when we get brought in the second time that they've managed to restore their systems. So that's it for the two scenarios. I hope they were useful. If in your organization, use the scenarios, change them for what you need, make sure they're applicable to your own environment, add a bit more to it. But yeah, we should be doing tabletops quite regular. The next slide is our post-incident review. So this is, as I said at the beginning, we're going to do we're going to talk about post-incident reviews. We're not going to do one because it's quite hard when there's just me and Vanessa doing these scenarios. Obviously, if you're doing a tabletop yourself, you need to make sure that you're including everybody within your cyber incident response team, because you need views from different people as you're doing that. So incident response, it's key, it's crucial, it's vital that you have a well-rehearsed cyber incident response plan. It should be a living document. As new threats come about, you need to make sure that your documentation is appropriate and suitable for the types of things that your organization may face. It has to be updated regularly, at least on an annual basis, and following a cybersecurity incident. The post-incident review needs to be conducted as quickly after an incident or tabletop exercise as possible. We recommend no longer than 1 to 2 weeks, because people have day jobs. They're not going to remember everything about the incident. The sooner you can do that, the better in terms of your learning and being able to better your organization to, as I said before, protect against, detect, and respond to future cybersecurity incidents. A post-incident review should answer the following questions at a minimum. Basically, you need to understand what has happened. What's the impact to the organization? Is there anything we should be doing better? What went well during the response? What didn't go so well? What do we need to improve on? What can we improve in terms of our cybersecurity capabilities? And all that should be fed back into your organization's approach to cybersecurity and incident response. So thinking across the pillars, people, processes, technology, physical, and informational. For example, both attacks came from a phishing attack, which is really common and something that we see all the time. We need to make sure that our staff are trained to spot and how to report phishing attacks before they become something that could be a nuisance. So just as we come to the end then, so how can we help? Yeah, obviously we've been through a tabletop exercise. We've tried to do this quickly as possible, but we can do more in-depth things. So we have a number of services when it comes to cyber incident response and cybersecurity. So we've got our Cyber Incident Response Management Foundation training course. So that's a course, that's a one-day course that's taught by myself. At the end of it, you will do an exam, and hopefully, if you pass the exam, you will get a qualification out of it as well. That sets the foundations for what incident response is, and it talks a lot about the terminology that we've mentioned during this webinar. The next one there is a cybersecurity health check. This is an assessment of your organization's cybersecurity controls across a wide range of areas. It also includes a vulnerability assessment, which then feeds back into that assessment that's conducted. The third one there is our Cyber Comply product, which is a modular software application which you can use for your organization to improve and enhance your cybersecurity. One of the modules in there is cyber incident response, which allows you to manage and document an incident as it's occurring. Documentation is key. We need to make sure that we are documenting every stage of that. Vanessa talked about chain of custody, which is key, in taking detailed notes. Cyber Comply will help you to do that, and that's something that you can keep out of band as well from your IT environment. The next three that we'll talk about, so we've got our cyber incident response readiness assessment. This is something that Vanessa and I will do. It's a gap assessment of your cyber incident response capabilities. We look across cyber incident response, threat and vulnerability management, event logging and monitoring, and business continuity and disaster recovery, and how that all comes together to help, for your organization to better protect against, detect, and respond to cybersecurity incidents. The one in the middle there is our cyber incident response tabletop exercises. Like I said, we've tried to do this as quickly as possible to fit it into this webinar, but we do have a tabletop exercise that we do create bespoke scenarios for your environment. So we'll sit with you, we'll talk about your risks, we'll talk about your environments, what controls do you have in place, what should we test your cyber incident response capability against. And then our final one there is our reactive emergency cyber incident response service, which if you have a cyber incident, we will come and help. We will provide whatever resource you need during a cybersecurity incident. And that includes digital forensics, includes malware analysis, includes incident management and coordination. We will help wherever you need. And that is a 24/7 service as well. We do have an on-call rota, so you can call us anytime. There is always somebody on call that will help. So, final slide. We're on to questions. Like I said, thank you very much for your time today. I hope it was useful. If you do have any questions, please reach out to us anyway, but we'll try and get through a couple of these questions now. So, right, just looking at the questions.
There's a few people that asked, will the presentation be sent out? Yes, it will be.
Yeah, so Mihail, I believe Mihail has already shared it. So Mihail is one that sets these up. You should have a link to it either in the chat or on your email. Sorry, there was a question early on that talked about why align to NIST and not ISO 27001. 27001 is around cybersecurity controls. It's your information security management system. It's the controls that your organization needs to have in place. It does include incident response, but it only so far as there's a requirement that you should have vulnerability management, incident response. If you're going to go down the ISO route, there is an ISO standard, which is 27035, parts 1 and 2, which talk all around the sort of things you should have in place. We don't generally see it that often. The terminology is slightly different, but the approach and the stages is similar. So containment, eradication, recovery, those sort of things. Yeah, there's some really good comments in terms of the controls that people should have in. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's something that would be discussed during the post-incident. Just one for you, Vanessa. Would a normal organizational cyber incident response team have the capability to take a forensically sound image?
This is kind of hard. I suppose they wouldn't, but I'd say it's best practice to have the capability of taking an image, and you can always put it down as a risk as long as you know. When I say what you're doing, that's not the right words to put. As long as you take that image and you're not working directly on the original. Yes, it is best practice to obviously do it in a forensically sound manner, but there are other methods of taking the image that obviously are a little bit more cheaper, but you can put that in your migrating risks and that will reduce the cost. But it's more important to not work on the original itself in case anything happens, because you are then potentially changing the data.
Yeah.
If that answers that.
Hopefully that answers it. Another question here, do you have any guidance on tips in delivering tabletop exercises as a consultancy, e.g. as a third party to a customer? You need to understand the environment. This is why during our tabletops, we need to understand a client's environment so that we can work with them to come up with those bespoke scenarios, as I mentioned in the last couple of slides. Sorry, we've got a lot of questions. I'm trying to go through them because we've got a few comments as well.
Yes, thank you to everyone with the lovely comments, by the way.
They are great. Thank you very much. How large a team do you have to provide cyber incident response retainer services? So there is our on-call is 3 people, but it includes us 2 in terms of our cyber incident response. But we also have support from our data breach management team as well, which is a team of solicitors, lawyers who can do that capability as well. No, we don't have any CIR services on Scottish frameworks, but we're not really restricted to a certain framework. We can amend to what we need. I think I know what you're on about in terms of the Scottish frameworks. There's a lot of great material provided by the Scottish government in terms of incident response. So I don't know the cost of the one-day training off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I'd have to go and have a look at the website off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody can reach out and give you that cost. I'll leave Vanessa to answer the last question then. So what's a good way to create scenarios to be tested for internal tabletops?
Oh, well, For mine, I go from experience. I shouldn't say that really, should I? Of what's happened to other organisations. But a good thing as well is actually to look on the news. I do a lot of research when I have time, looking into particular ransomware groups, which is why we chose Black Hat, because obviously today it's very relevant. CLOP and things like that. I was going to say Twitter, that's why I paused. It's not Twitter anymore, is it? It's X. There's lots of information there, Discord, all that kind of thing. I just gather information and find out what's relevant at the time, and then change the scenario to be bespoke to your organisation.
Yeah.
It's relevant.
Yeah, I completely agree with Vanessa. You need to try and remain current with what's going on, because that's the best way to test. If other organisations or similar organisations are having those types of cybersecurity incidents, then test your people, test your teams on those cybersecurity incidents. You know, that's the best way, because that could happen. It's not a case of if, but when, as we always say. I'm just looking at the time. We are out of time now. It's 4 o'clock. If you do have any further questions, please reach out to any of the group, or any of the companies within the group. We work for GRCI Law. Please visit us. If you've got any questions, please send us an email and we'll try to answer them as quickly as possible.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.